Good afternoon, YouTube. Today I am making this video in response to a posting by Dinesh D'Souza. He was originally trying to identify the problem, as you see there, this controversy in the US. But what he actually did is he's hit something close to home here in Canada, a problem with our political system here in Canada under the Liberal government. And I just wanted to note down what he said. Thank you for watching.
The real issue before the court in the Supreme Court nomination fight. In her opening statement, Amy Coney Barrett laid out the philosophical issue pretty clearly.
I believe Americans of all backgrounds deserve an independent Supreme Court that interprets our Constitution and laws as they are written. And I believe I can serve my country by playing that role.
Basically, she said this: in a democratic society, it is the people's job, through the democratic process, through their elected representatives, to make the rules under which they live. And this is the meaning of majority rule. Now, majority rule is not unlimited. It is constrained by specified and enumerated minority rights, like the rights spelled out in the Bill of Rights. Those are not up for majority adjudication. But apart from that, the majority, by and large, gets to carve out the policies that shape our society. And the job of a judge, Amy Coney Barrett said, is to be sort of like an umpire or a referee in a baseball game. The judge's job is not to make the rules. The judge's job is to call the plays, and to call the plays according to the rules. The judge's job is to implement the rules, enforce them, make sure that they're being carried out fairly and impartially. So this is the conservative philosophy. It contrasts with the liberal philosophy, which takes the judge, the umpire, and makes him sort of a player. The judge gets to jump into the game and take sides. The judge gets ultimately to change the rules through the technique of interpretation. In other words, interpretation becomes a kind of thinly veiled excuse to modify the rules as they go along. And this is called the living Constitution. The idea here from the left is that the Constitution can't be dead. It can't be left at 200 years old. It has to be constantly, quote, adapted. But of course, the Constitution makes provision for a process of adaptation. In the document itself, it's called the amendment process, and it's made difficult to do for the simple reason that the Constitution shouldn't be like an accordion, a malleable document. It should change, but change only in accordance with the wishes of a kind of calm, deliberate supermajority of Americans. Why? Because the Constitution is a super law. It stands, in a sense, above the other laws. It overrides them. Laws that contradict the Constitution can be held to be unconstitutional. So the living Constitution idea is, in a sense, incoherent because it ignores the process of amendment and tries to make an end run around that. So ultimately, what the left is proposing is a process of constitutional interpretation that is not consistent with America being a democratic society, which tries ultimately to turn judges who are referees into players, and which perverts our process, distorts what the founders set up and had in mind. Amy Coney Barrett is needed on the court to restore sort of vestige of constitutional balance and constitutional sanity.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there, because in those short sentences, he's essentially identifying several issues. So the first thing is, judges can't be bought, should never be bought, and anybody that tries to do that essentially is circumventing the entire system, and then the integrity of the entire system will fail. Because, as he said, the judges are supposed to be impartial but play exactly to the laws that are already in place and have an indifference to the kind of bias that the liberals are proposing. because it's the justice system can't function if you have that kind of imbalance. Pardon me. So now I'm going to switch to the scandals in which the Prime Minister was involved. If you look at the SNC Lavalin scandal, the reason why I firmly believe that Trudeau should go to prison, and also Gerald Butts for that matter, and they should have their family assets seized, in my opinion as well. The reason that is because what they're doing is exactly what Dinesh did there. The Liberals have cleverly corrupted the highest judicial body in government. Not corrupted in the sense that they ever corrupted Jody Wilson-Raybould, but in the sense that because she refused to be biased and she refused to circumvent the law, and because in a sense to her it's morality, but it's also living within the strictures, the confines of the law itself, and never breaching that, because she understands that the justice system can't function if she's going to do that. So she didn't approve SNC for the, what was that, to get the case thrown out or something like that, and to give them favor, you could say, for in terms of their, because they were facing legal action and she was meant to look the other way. So then she was fired, and Jane Philpott joined her out of loyalty. So if I look at what the Liberals have done, because we all know that it's this in Canada, we know this exists, but there's nothing that we can really do about it, that Trudeau will get judges that are predisposed to him to get the case thrown out. And when he talks about the ethics commissioner really doesn't have any power, because he got the case thrown away by shutting down Parliament. So now everything, all the investigations that were happening against him has to start again from the beginning. So we're looking at, I'm trying to identify the problem. There's several problems going on here. The number one problem is that Trudeau is like the Liberals that Dinesh describes. The Constitution is living. The Constitution needs to be adapted. There's something that Jordan Peterson said to me that stuck with me. The people who claim to want to change things that have fundamentally evolved slowly over time and want to change it immediately, those are the people that you should be afraid of, that you should be worried about, that you should never ever award a position of power or authority. And I'm paraphrasing because I'm trying to remember the exact statement. He warned at the trial of C-16, or the committee, the committee that was overviewing C-16, and he was there at the front line, and he said, the people who are going to define hate speech are exactly the ones that you wouldn't want to define hate speech in the first place, because those are the power hungry. Like, an irrational person would never ever try to define or put their own constraints against hate speech, because it's too complex an idea to define hate, and it's better to leave it in the public domain so that it can be publicly rejected, and then that kind of behavior will slowly disappear because it will be rejected by society in conversation or whatever. It's meant to socialize a person better, essentially. So that kind of idea can be introduced to the public domain, that hateful idea, and then it will be rejected ultimately. So people have the freedom to do that, but what they were trying to do is constrain essentially what Dinesh was saying there, to create a super law that will introduce their own bias into the Constitution and then force everybody to live underneath that bias with the full threat and full force of the law over them that will punish them. And what Jordan Peterson was trying to say is that it's so vague. Their laws are they're deliberately designed to be vague in order to trap as many people as possible underneath the hate speech law. So there are multiple levels of corruption that exist underneath the Liberal government, the Trudeau government, that essentially the media has been hiding from everybody. But for me, when Dinesh made this speech, I was brought back to the SNC scandal, the WE scandal, how the Liberal government is essentially imposing those new super laws that are forcing our country's justice system essentially into corruption. And I don't know why people don't get upset about this, because they're like, it's an obvious corruption of our justice system. And I believe that he's also appointed new judges and new senators in, so that if a bill comes before the Senate, the Liberals will gain favor to pass that radicalized bill, and they won't. The House of Commons is not the only arena in which they can push what they need, essentially. But the one thing that really was a perfect tell was when Trudeau shut down Parliament to essentially stop the investigations in the WE scandal and then force everything to go essentially back to ground zero, because there was going to be a investigation into him, I think by the RCMP, but it could also be by the Ethics Commissioner himself, and a committee would be formed, that he was forced to stand in front of a committee and actually answer for his crimes. But now that he's, shut down Parliament for, I think it was a month or something like that, he won't answer for his crimes maybe never. Maybe this whole thing will blow under the rug again, like the last scandal. But the fact of the matter is that what Dinesh said here is extremely, extremely important. And to display the Liberals in that manner, how they feel that the Constitution is fluid and adaptation is required, and the Conservatives don't, that's what hit me really good. And essentially, what I hope for is the restoration of the rule of law, but it can only happen if a government has been, if Trudeau's government is gone and the entire cabinet is cleaned out. I don't know how many Liberals look at the behavior of the Prime Minister's administration with disgust. Maybe they don't at all. I really, apart from Jody and Philpott, I don't think that there were any other members that really came forward against him, ever. I could be wrong about that. I could be forgetting somebody. But essentially, I wish that the Liberals would take more responsibility for the corruption of their leader and get him out. Because without a doubt, Justin Trudeau is the worst Prime Minister of the Liberal Party, in addition to the worst Prime Minister of Canada. Not only his repeated scandals should put him in prison, and it should it should be enough to warrant at least a very public investigation into him that would force him to resign at the very least. So all I'm saying is that with the justice system being as it is, Obama actually established the system that is currently corrupting the United States by placing those judges, you could say, in play, and encouraging that kind of corrupted behavior. Perhaps they pay the judges with a lot of money or favors or political influence. You never know what's the prize, but they pay them off, and they get them in the game, as Dinesh put, and essentially they throw the game in favor of whomever they're being paid to favor. So, and I'm seeing this here in our justice system, because obviously there's no punishment for the breach of, I guess you could say, the Conflict of Interest Act, among other things, that Trudeau is guilty of. And then, of course, trying to corrupt the highest judiciary body in Canada and failing, and then firing her, you know. So it's to me, it's a slam dunk if it would only get a reasonable court, if it came before a reasonable judge that was unbiased, there would be charges laid, and I hope jail time and other restitutions made to Canadians. Because you know, to me it's hard for me to watch the media these days, because it's so depressing to see them get away with every crime in the book, like short of murder, but I don't know, the way it's going out, it's so depressing. And well, I'm sorry this video has gone on too long, but I wanted to share my thoughts with you. So thank you for watching. Goodbye.